everybody, and welcome to Pod Hard, a pod about movies that have action in it. My name is Jonas Högberg, and in the other ring corner we find...
Anders Hultqvist.
We are two guys from Sweden who have been doing this pod for quite some time now. But all of a sudden, we got this idea that maybe we should seek out the international market and do it in English.
Yeah.
Is it a folly? Is it a grand, illustrious idea? Well, that's for us to know and you to find out. Or how do you say that? I don't know.
I think we might have been quarantined in Swedish.
Oh, yeah, that's how we put it, yeah. So, Anders, what is Pod Hard?
It's what you just described. No, but the idea is that we watch an action movie. We started out as a James Bond pod way back.
Yeah.
I was so nervous that I had to drink a lot of whiskey, but we are recording this a bit too early for me to doing that. Otherwise, I would have been drunk.
Okay, Anders would have been plastered, yeah.
I'll do my best to appear as drunk. No, but
as you can hear, we will absolutely drop some words and falter and search for words, but we'll try and we'll see how we go.
I think I had some idea of you being able to. You are out in your garden and planting a couple of flowers. And you have a strong urge to watch a James Bond movie.
Okay.
But you don't have the time, so you listen to us describing the Bond movie for you.
I don't know. I think that's a feeling everybody can relate to. You're out in your garden, you're knackering about, and suddenly, oh man, James Bond. I gotta watch James Bond now, but I can't because I'm out in the garden. What to do? Oh yeah, Pod Hard. So yeah, we started out as a James Bond pod, but when we inevitably had seen all the James Bond movies, we sort of felt, this is fun, we should continue doing this, and maybe do action movies...
in general?
Well, in general, yeah. So we've been doing that for like 2 or 3 years, but that's in the past, I guess. Now we are gonna do a bit of an experiment moving forward, and what's that, Anders?
So we're gonna go to the past. Actually, we're gonna trace all of the action cinema back to film's roots. I don't exactly know why, but it has been fun so far.
Well, I think the idea was that we were gonna trace action movie history and how action movies have developed throughout the ages. And see what what came first, who was the first action movie star, why do action movies of today do these things? Oh, it's because of this. So it's sort of like you're learning some history, but most of all, we're out here to have fun. So it's not going to be like all facts and no play. No. We're all about play.
But was it shocking to you that action cinema was more or less fully formed in the mid-1890s?
Well, yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, you and me have both been to film history classes. And in those classes, we tend to learn a lot about, the Lumiere brothers, the pioneers of cinema. But in those movies, it's mainly like documentaries, people looking at a train coming into a station and being all aghast by, oh my god, I'm watching a train coming towards me and it's scary, oh my god. But really, it was a lot of different things, early movies. And a lot of these things are actually action-packed to the max.
So we go back even before actual cinema captured on celluloid, because the early examples, I would say, are mostly, I guess, technical achievements is kind of important to action cinema, pushing tech
Yeah.
but mostly capturing movement and bodies in movement. So that's where we begin with in 1878 with Xalier Gardner at a gallop, a horse running.
Yeah.
Edward Muybridge experiment in capturing the movement of a horse.
And it's like pictures after each other, so it's not really like a movie, but it's like when you're flipping through a notepad and have done some drawings on it, sort of like that. And then they did some more experiments in the 80s. Funnily enough, they took out a camera that they called a photographic gun, which sort of appeals to us action aficionados. That was real fun. And
from the get-go, you're shooting movies. I mean,
fantastic! I love it.
There's something inherently aggressive about the design of that that camera.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, cinema was action movie from the get-go. That's great. It's great.
So Muybridge continues to do some studies in how human bodies move. I think the first shot on film is a bird flying or something. I think it's some animal movement as well. Etienne Jules Marie recorded some fencing, which will be important later on when we get to the swashbuckling era, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And now we're in 1890, I think, with Escrime, the movie about fencing. And it's around this time that Thomas Edison's company starts experimenting with movies. And I guess it's William Dixon that is like the big proprietor and the big inventor that is doing a lot of interesting things.
He's quite early with remakes. I watched his early boxing movie where the boxers didn't even start boxing. So I guess that was a failed experiment. So he did a remake of that one the year after, 1894, where the guys actually connect. So we got an early boxing fight.
Okay, well that's great. He's evolving his style.
So remakes are built into the film format from the get-go.
And that's funny because the year after that he is doing a parody of his boxing movies with the Boxing Cats.
Yeah, he goes the whole
the whole 9 yards. So yeah, it's a weird movie. They have like they're puppeteering 2 cats that has two small boxing gloves over their paws, and they're tussling these cats together in a small boxing ring with a judge looking in the middle at everything. It's super weird, and I guess this was a hoot for people in the 1890s.
It seems to have been quite a few cat movies early on. It's interesting the parallel that cats were so important to early cinema, as it's quite important to internet as well. There's a lot of cats going on.
That's an interesting point. I was thinking a lot about how the early cinema really is like YouTube videos of today. It's people showing off their skills, doing acrobatics and some music. Actually, we have the first sound movies actually produced in 1895. And, people may think that the sound wasn't introduced until 1927. But actually, Edison's company experimented with sound in 1894.
That's unheard of.
So yeah, stay tuned in Pod Hard for a lot of weird dad jokes and stuff like that. It's gonna be a hoot, I promise.
I mean, Dixon, he saw that he could combine boxing and cats. So yeah, and his early franchise remake thingy. But then he delivers the first real action cinema narrative in 1894, the Chinese laundry scene. This is a strong action feature. We got the setup where a guy throws a stool in the head of a police officer. Pretty violent stuff. And then they start running around in revolving doors. He climbs up on top of the set and throws a plank on the cop.
Yeah, and it's the first movie, maybe, we can't be sure of that, of course, but I think it may be the first movie with an intentional frame drop. Because when the policeman is out to kick the guy lying on the floor, there's a frame drop and the kick doesn't connect. Instead, the guy goes under a trap door into the big door and escapes. And it's very nice, the impact of the frame drop. And, this is a proponent of a lot of good action movies of today, where you, when you want to connect with a fist, you usually cut away a couple of frames to get the impact much more faster and harder. Already here in 1895.
I mean, Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung did a pretty good refined version of this vaudeville act in Mr. Nice Guy, running around indoors.
Yeah, that's one of our favorite movies, actually. That of course, there's a lot of more doors in that, and a lot of more players.
You
running
add
around.
a door per decade.
For every decade, yeah, that's right. So that's like, what's that? Like 10, 11 doors or something? Yeah. Fantastic. So you can see that already here in the Chinese laundry scene that people are running about, having a gay old time and experimenting with movie magic. It's fantastic.
And he's involved in these early colorization movies as well. Annabel Serpentine dance. There's a couple of them where they colorize the dress when she dances. And dance movies seem pretty popular.
Yeah, and that will also be a proponent of our when we're moving through action movie history. We'll have something of that kind. I think we'll be watching Singing in the Rain, at least. And it was popular to, put in famous persons as well. You had like a big bodybuilder, the precursor to Arnold Schwarzenegger, that stood and did bodybuilding poses. Sandon, I think his name was. And you had Annie Oakley, which was the wild western star from Buffalo Bill's Western Show, that showed off her sharpshooting skills. Famous people were getting even more famous through cinema. So a bit later on, we start to get a lot of Japanese movies showcasing, Japanese martial arts. One of these movies is called it's a kabuki performance, I guess, but it's very well choreographed. I mean, it may be one of the earliest examples of choreography in movie. They're almost, performing a dance rather than fighting with their spears.
Yeah, there are a couple of these filmed by Constant Girel. Was he one of these guys that the Lumieres had sent out to record?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Things at different parts of the world. So there's not much Japanese movies that has survived this early. These four are pretty fun to watch, and I like the Japanese sword fencing from 1897, which is a very early many-on-many brawl where they basically just pile up.
They go to town on each other.
But it's got a rawness that is interesting, and the one you're talking about is quite funny. They bash each other with his sticks, and ends with a guy pouring a bucket of water over himself and lifting his sword to the sky. Must be some symbolism.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Yeah, exactly. What was the water for? Maybe it was really hot that day.
So Georges Méliès has showed up on screen doing some trick filming and stuff.
And, you know, I'm guessing a lot of people know about Georges Méliès. He was like the big star of the early movies, a French superstar who made a lot of impressive sets and a lot of comedy movies where he used editing as an important tool of the movie. And in 1900, for example, he made a movie called Going to Bed Under Difficulties, which I think is really funny still today. It's the plot is about a guy trying to go to bed, but for every clothing item he takes off, the camera clips, and suddenly he stands with the new clothes on. So he can't get the clothes off, and he's just getting more desperate and desperate as time goes on. It's a hoot.
It's very well made, but more action oriented. He predates that even with the surrender of Tournavos from 1897, which is a battle scene with the shootouts and even features an explosion and stuff.
Yeah, and he was, I can't quite understand why he was so mad about the moon. I mean, we watched a couple of Méliès movies preparing for this pod, and like in at least 3 of them, there's something about the moon in that movie. Like either the moon is a big blob coming closer to the camera, it's a face, or like in his most famous movie, The Voyage to the Moon, the moon gets a big rocket in its eye. So he has a fetish for the moon and sort of deconstructing it. But moving on, you really like this Attack on a China Mission from 1900, yeah?
Yeah, it's just James Williamson comes out the gate, firing all cylinders. I think it's a great scene set during the Boxer Rebellion in China.
Yeah, I guess it was, in his mind, I think he was making like a documentary scene, but it's actually more like an action scene because there's a lot of things going on. There's people running in and I mean, extras bonanza. There's like 50 people or something running about shooting at each other, and you know, craziness evolves.
It's a bit hard to tell who's shooting who, but it also establishes a pretty clean action narrative. We got the boxers who arrive through the gate aggressively and start shooting people up, and people running about, and then there's an army of sailors arriving that just seems to shoot up the whole place. I think the house starts burning. Not all of this movie is intact.
And another of your favorite movies is An Explosion of a Motor Car that came the same year, 1900s. And that's a really funny movie as well. It's about a car coming into and suddenly exploding. I don't know if it's meant to run into a rock or something that is placed on the road. It's hard to see, actually. But all of a sudden, it explodes, and some sort of policeman comes in to see, hey, what happened? What was this? And then he looks up, and, oh, something is coming down from the sky. Oh my God, I should get out of the way. And then all of a sudden, you know, body parts starts raining down on this scene. It's sort of like an Peter Jackson splatter movie all of a sudden.
I like that the policeman starts collecting the body parts and pile them up.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, but the title and the incident, I mean, it's called Explosion of a Motor Car, and there's an explosion of a motor car.
Yeah.
Seems like an early action movie that knows what it's doing.
It knows what it's about, yeah, for sure.
We jumped ahead a bit. There's some earlier war depictions that are interesting, and I thought Alice Guy's surprise attack on a house at daybreak, while also pretty chaotic, has some merits from 1898. The train has arrived at 96 as well, so there's a lot of these actualities things arriving at different stations. Yeah, so Méliès, he has another one that is maybe more interesting from an action perspective, I think. The Fat and Lean wrestling match from 1900. I mean, this is a masterpiece in wrestling, brawl, choreography and trick filming. I mean, they tear each other apart, they rebuild, they flatten each other, and they tear out women from their bodies. And it also hints at being a never-ending cycle of violence and magic.
Yeah, it's really funny, and I mean Méliès is really funny actually in a lot of these movies. When he tries to make movies that are more dramatic, I think he fails a bit because maybe it was a grand stuff in that age, but I think nowadays you can't watch that stuff without being truly bored. But things like Fat and Lean wrestling match from 1901 is actually quite funny today.
We're only in it for the action, so...
Yeah.
I mean, people start experimenting with the narrative here and telling a story through continuous shots in the early 1900s. And you can see that as either a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, these early action vehicles, they just go by movement and the spectacular violence and explosions. Porter arrives with the Great Train Robbery. I mean, I guess many people see this as the first action movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it does some technical achievements. But we have proven them wrong. There's earlier action cinema.
Yeah, maybe it was the first movie to combine a lot of these things in the same flick.
And it tells a story in another way. It's and it has some camera moves, some pans and tilts. And it also features what seems to be the first official use of a stunt double, or credited stunt double, Frank Hanaway.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, it's not a fantastic movie by today's standards, but you know, it's interesting at least.
I really like these jump cuts they do in these early movies when when they beat each other up. I like in A Daring Daylight Burglary from 1903 from Frank S. Mothershaw. They have a brutal brawl on top of a roof, and then they just jump cut to him throwing a doll off the roof. And they do this in Train Robbery as well, but just switch to a doll and throw it off the train. I like it's so quick, and while you see the cut and that they switch it to a doll, it gets visceral and brutal by never cutting away. I think it works really well.
Yeah. You know, 65 years later, Monty Python would use this as comedy. You know, throwing dolls out of buildings, but here and now it's drama. We're moving on a bit, going into the 1900s here, and there's a movie that maybe features the first, you know, real action movie hero.
Most stuff we've been watching up to this point follows the bad guys trying to get away, and cops chasing after, and justice prevails.
The movie is called The Dude and the Burglars from 1903, and well, he's quite a dude, all right.
I mean, it really established this suave, hard-boiled hero. I mean, he doesn't give a damn.
That's fantastic. I'm watching the movie right now, and it's quite brutal, you know. The bad guy is coming in trying to strangle a woman, but the dude just casually pulls out a gun and, oh no you won't, and the woman has fainted on his shoulder while he sort of just points his gun at different people. Oh yeah, and then he pulls out something from the gun. The gun wasn't real, it was like a bang flag that comes out of the gun.
But he shoots another gun at first.
Oh yeah, he switches guns.
I think he shoots a guy in the leg and then he switches.
That's so weird.
But he's so cool about it.
Yeah. So it's his coolness that we take with us, for action movie history.
Sadly, the woman in peril is established quite early as an action cinema trope.
Yeah.
Which to this day prevails. I do wish we had come a bit further in that regard.
Well, it's only really nowadays that the women are getting other roles than merely being like the foil.
No, we're gonna watch these train movies, the Hazards of Helen, later on in the 1914, 1918, somewhere around that. We'll get back to that, but we get the early female action heroes.
Erase everything I said. Yeah, so in 1905 we have a movie called The Polite Lunatic, which is a really funny comedy movie, and it's made by one of your favorites of this era, I guess.
Yeah, he seems like the big action guy here early. James Williamson, who made the Big Swallow in 1901, and of course my favorite, what's it called? Attack on China Mission. He did that one as well.
Yeah, but that was more action oriented. This movie is more about a guy being, he thinks he's someone else, a lunatic, and is being chased by a perfectly normal guy, actually. And the chase scene, it sort of reminded me of the chase scene in, I think it's Casino Royale, the Bond movie, where they're they're climbing these construction building sites, and it's actually quite. It's both comedy and both action.
I mean. There was a bunch of chase movies. I've seen quite a few. I think Williamson has a little crisper editing in his chases, slightly tighter. Many are like up to 10 people chasing one guy, and everyone has to be allowed to pass the camera, and then the camera lingers on and film a couple of people that doesn't have anything with anything to do, and then the chase goes on. Williamson cuts to the chase.
He cuts to the chase. The first time anyone cuts to the chase. Oh yeah, that's perfect.
I don't know about if it's the first time, but it's notable.
He was a proponent of cutting to the chase. Let's leave it at that, I guess.
I mean, he does an actuality later on. I don't know why he stopped doing narrative work, but he just films a guy who does jumps from a bicycle down in water.
Yeah. Mm.
And it seems to be filmed from different angles, and it has a pretty fast editing pattern.
So you can actually see a development from the 1890s where everything was stationary, and now we're starting to move the camera about and getting a bit of a snappier edit as well. So that's interesting that you can actually trace the development of cinema so clearly.
Yeah, I just get ship in that Méliès did a couple of pretty big set pieces in the adventurous automobile trip, which otherwise is quite boring, but you have a car that come jumping over a roof and smashes a train that explodes and stuff. So pretty big set pieces. This is the summer blockbuster, early
early Michael Bay movies.
I'd say Williamson probably is closer to Michael Bay with the crisp editing.
Yeah,
wouldn't you say? This is more like those catastrophe movies.
Oh, Emmerich, you mean?
Emmerich.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, sure. So we have early proponents for Emmerich and Michael Bay. That's fantastic already.
And you get this in 1905 as well, the police chasing Scorching Auto, which sounds exciting, but isn't very much so. I think it was made from leftovers from a cop's day or life, or what it was called. But it's a pretty slow chase, but the camera seems to be mounted on a car that follows the chase.
Mm.
So we got this movement inwards in depth in screen.
Oh yeah. Mm.
It has been done earlier on a couple of train movies, but I have seen one of those, but that inward movement seems pretty interesting.
And it's a lot. You said this earlier, but it's a lot of chase movies in the 1900s, and you have pulled out a couple of great examples here. Among these, a movie called La Course aux Poitrons from Romeo Bossetti in 1908, and I mean, this is slapstick comedy. It's great chases. It's a lot of edits, and pumpkins rolling down through hills in a small city. People getting hit by pumpkins. Magically jumping over fences. With people jumping over fences as well. Oh man, this movie has everything.
I mean, there's some amazing stunt work and pratfalls in this one. I mean, everyone topples over almost every cut in this one.
Yeah, this is like early Buster Keaton stuff.
I don't know about that donkey there dragging along, but there's utter chaos in this one.
Yeah, why do they need the donkey to follow everything?
Yeah, I really liked this one, the pumpkin race, and Alice Guy. The race for the sausage was pretty good as well. There's a dog stealing sausage, and it's everyone is falling over in almost every shot. Really great pratfalls. But she actually adds pillow fight into the chase. They just run by and have a fast, intense pillow fight. I think pillow fights, I noticed a couple of those when I went through movies as well. So she incorporates the pillow fight into the chase, which was quite interesting. And she got a stroller that is getting run over by a train.
Oh. Yeah, early, I don't know.
Action-packed.
Very action-packed.
Yeah, another good chase film was The Policeman's Little Run, La Cour de Sergent de Ville. Pardon my French. My French is up there.
A bit rusty,
with
I
my
think.
English. No, it's even worse. From Ferdinand Secca. I really like that one because it's also one of those cut to the chase movies where not every goddamn cop has to pass through the frame. And it also had early Batman TV show wall climbing. You know, when the wall is on the floor and they just flop about climbing up there.
Yeah.
Pretty good stuff.
Yeah, so, I mean, every stunt that you may have thought, oh yeah, that's really clever, it was actually done 70, 80 years earlier.
Yeah, it's all done before we hit 1907.
Yeah. And maybe the last movie we'll talk about in this episode is Boxing Fever, directed by A.E. Colby, which is well,
I mean, it starts out like some kind of early tournament movie, and a guy wins a boxing match and goes totally bonkers.
Yeah.
He goes out on the street and beat people up left to right. It's a really, it's a fight movie combined with a chase movie, because everybody gives chase, of course, when they get beat up. There's lots of fights, and that end scene has to be seen to be believed. There's a text at first says 3 hours later, and the boxer has stopped fighting and goes to a bar and gets really drunk. And when he gets home, at first he starts to fight himself, but then his wife gets up and they have an outright brawl. Pretty good fight. Vicious. Yeah, I want to see a Scott Adkins remake of this one. Throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
I really wanted to see the first Chinese film ever made from 1905, Ding Yun Shan, a recording of a Peking opera, but it was destroyed in a fire in the late 40s. We have a samurai movie as well. Miyamoto Musashi's Subjugation of the Lustful Old Man.
Good title.
I haven't found this. I think it's the first Miyamoto Musashi film. I think he is beating up some kind of monkey or something in this one.
Okay. I'm guessing a real monkey.
No, I think it's more of a demon.
Okay, a demon monkey. Okay.
A demon monkey. I think he goes around beating up demons.
Yeah, and around this time, also the first Western was conceived. I mean, you could argue that The Great Train Robbery is the first Western, but a lot of the stuff that we associate with Westerns was actually conceived in Life of a Cowboy, which also, I think, maybe lost. At least we couldn't find it. I mean, a lot of these movies that we're talking about, you can watch on YouTube, of course, because there's no copyright or anything. But also, a lot of these old silent movies are gone. I mean, they were filmed on these nitrate movies, which were extremely flammable. And a lot of these things went up in smoke. And I mean, a lot of Japanese movies, for sure. I think they had a great fire in Tokyo in the 20s, where a lot of early Japanese silent movie history was, erased. So what sort of lessons have we learned from early movie history, would you say, Anders?
Oh, did you see that one, How to Stop a Motor Car, about learning lessons?
How to stop a motor car?
Yeah. There's a cop trying to stop a car. He gets run over and just explodes in pieces.
Yeah.
Stop motion reanimates or combine again, which seems popular and pretty cool. Runs to an old fart cop who shows that you stop a car with your ass.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah.
So that's our lesson for today. How to stop a moving car with your ass. Okay. So in our next episode of Podhard Action Movie History Bonanza Craze, we'll be looking at I think 1910s. Let's see if we do the entire decade or if we want to narrow it down a bit. But we'll be, So I'm hoping we'll be getting into Hollywood movies next episode. Because a lot of the movie studios that were conceived in the 1900s moved out to Los Angeles around 1910, I think. So that's when the big blockbusters really took off. So this has been interesting. Podding in English. Do you even say that? Podding? Is that a word? Podcast? Partying, yeah. We've been partying all night, all day, all this hour. Man, I don't know what I'm saying. But I do know it's always a blast talking to you, Anders, about action movies. Let's keep doing that like forever, man.